It was a
Start every
decision, it was a decision that was made that we would start every meeting with the idea that we are here to try to pass a green amendment here in Washington State. And yeah, that's how we start every meeting.
Hi, and welcome back to Green Jeans. It has been a minute, but before I do the intro, I have some exciting news for you all, and that is that we are doing a Green Amendment tour. 6 cities, 6 days. Mom, where are you going?
Oh my gosh, it's going to Washington State, and we're going to span the state from Seattle to Spokane. In the middle, we're going to Olympia, Yakima, Vancouver, and Richland. I think I got them all. And I'm going to be joined by the leader of the Washington Green Amendment Coalition, David Kipnis. And that's actually who we're going to talk to today, Annika, to get a little bit more insight into how the Washington Green Amendment movement is advancing, learn a little bit more about David, and learn a little bit more about how exciting this tour is going to be.
Oh, nice. So everybody, just a quick reminder, you'll be able to see all the info on how to find out about the tour throughout this show and in the show notes and on the wagreenamendment.org website. But just a reminder for any new listeners, and it's been a minute, we are Green Jeans, a podcast talking about environmental, social justice, important issues from a generational perspective, because I am a, quote, budding activist, because I'm in my late 20s, and I am joined by my mom, who is a lifelong activist, but professionally has been doing this for how many years, Mom?
30 plus.
And do you want to give everybody your titles, official titles?
So I'm the Delaware Riverkeeper, leader of the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, and I also founded and lead the National Green Amendments for the Generations movement and organization. And for anybody who doesn't know what a Green Amendment is, a Green Amendment is a constitutional amendment that protects our environmental rights in a really powerful way.
So stay tuned, listen to this episode to not just learn about the tour, but the Green Amendment movement. That'll be a lot of what we're talking about throughout this series. We've got lots of great guests coming up, none of which I will announce to you now because you have to tune in to know. And follow us on social media. And with that, we're going to get into the show.
So welcome, David Kipnis, to the Green Jeans podcast. We're so excited to have you.
So excited to be here.
So we gave you a little bit of an introduction. Just to remind everybody, this is David Kipnis, and David has been for several years now leading the Washington Green Amendment Coalition and doing a really fantastic job. And so, David, I think we really just want to start in with, tell people a little bit about yourself, who you are, what do you do, and what brought you to the Green Amendment movement.
Yeah, I've been involved in social and environmental justice for many years, and got involved with the Green Amendment when I was actually pursuing a different bit of legislation involved, which crossed paths with the Green Amendment. And at that time, Maya had connected with a local legislator in the 40th District here in Washington State, Deborah Lakanoff, and the three of us got together and began a larger movement here in Washington State that's been going for 3.5, 4 years now, and gaining momentum each year.
So David, when you heard about it, what kind of drew you into the Green Amendment? I feel like we hear a lot of people that there seemed to be either a defining thing in their life or just something they heard. So what kind of was the draw for you?
Yeah, interesting question. I think the draw for me is it became clear as I began to look into it a little bit more that the Green Amendment is the intersection between health, social, and environmental justice. A lot of my life I had been focused on mostly social justice kind of issues, and in the last 8 years, became more interested in environmental issues, and I kind of compartmentalized them. But I see the Green Amendment as the intersection between health, social, and environmental justice. And that's really what draws me so close to it.
So there's not a particular issue or struggle within your life that you're facing. It's really thinking more from a community perspective, how this helps everybody?
Yeah, I'd say that's exactly right for me. Yeah, there wasn't a particular incident It's the accumulation of incidents that keep occurring. Yes, the lack of justice involved in both health. The health disparities between communities is very clear. The social justice issues remain very clear in this country, and the environmental issues are mounting.
Do you feel like, David, because one of the things we do in this podcast is this kind of this like generational perspective. So it's also always interesting to hear like people's life stories as they've come into this. So do you feel like throughout your life you've kind of seen these inequities all along, or it's become more apparent to you, and just like how that's kind of played into your life and like who you are as the wonderful person that you are today?
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's an interesting question. I think that, a lot of it is based on the environment that you grow up in. I grew up in an environment where social justice was critically important. I grew up in Chicago in the 60s, and there was a lot going on. And so for me, I was involved in community activities, from a very young age, and that has been my focus. I was involved in mental health. From mental health, I went into education, and now in my later years, I'm involved in more activism type roles in my community.
So one thing, David, that's really striking. So in every state where there's a Green Amendment effort happening, right, how it advances is very different. The role that Green Amendments for the Generation plays in the development and implementation of the strategy is different based on what the community wants and needs, and the roles of the different people, the different activists within the state that are drawn to the movement is different. The thing that's so beautiful about Washington, and I have to say, I really think that this is because of you and your personality. You really have pulled together over time this really incredibly positive, tight-knit, dedicated group of people that are coming together on a regular basis to develop and implement strategies on the Green Amendment movement. And most recently, this idea of a tour, which we'll get to. We want to make sure we hear about the Washington tour that you've conceived of, you all have conceived of and are advocating. But I'm just wondering, how are you experiencing this group, and what do you think it is about your leadership style that has brought in this team and made everybody work so closely together and so cohesively and so positively towards the Washington Green Amendment?
I'm not sure that it's anything about my leadership style. I think that it's very fortunate to be in a place that's full of activism. And so I kind of feel like I'm following the leadership of a lot of other activists here in this region, and have fallen into the Green Amendment based on some of what we've already discussed. I think that so I would say that Seattle is an easier kind of a place to get something like this going. In my leadership style, I think that I wouldn't even say that I'm the leader, I'm the facilitator. So I think that everybody in our group of about 7 have a very strong voice, and allowing them to express that and making them feel free, to be a leader themselves is an important part of our group here in Washington State.
And how do you feel, David? I think one of the things when it comes to something like so powerful too is that the idea is always like, oh, you must be like feel good, motivated all the time. And as we know, like it's difficult. The Green Amendment movement is shockingly a challenging concept for some folks, and this whole idea that it's not that everybody wants it and it appears for everybody to make a decision on tomorrow. Like there's a whole legislative process and all of that. So how do you and your group, or as you've gone through this, however, like stay motivated, stay positive, also acknowledge how you deal with when, that was a real blow to our ego or our wants, and we thought it was going to go. Like how do you guys roll with the punches, because everybody's different how they do it.
Yeah. I think that's really true, Annika. And it's like, I think that there are two premises, I think, that we sit on to allow us to stay positive no matter what the ebb or flow is. And I think the first one is that it's really important to bring to the front of people's consciousness that we do have a right to clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment, and that we can speak up for that right. I think that many of us have been beaten down by the corporations, and maybe by some of the government as well, and have lost that voice and lost sight of that. And for us, we think that even if we never are able to achieve a constitutional amendment here in Washington State, just bringing that forward is an important concept, particularly to the youth, particularly to the future generations. So I think we stay focused on that. And the other second thing I think that keeps us positive is we realize that this is not a short-term effort. This is a long-term effort, and we're talking years. And so we remind each other in our group of these two concepts, and that keeps us focused and positive.
So one of the things that I think is so beautiful, and you do it with absolute dedication and regularity, David, and I'm sure it's very conscious, but you may tell me it's not. At the beginning of every single meeting, you highlight why we're coming together. Like you say, we are coming together here. Why don't you tell people what you say? Do you realize what you say every meeting?
Yes, it's conscious. It's
So
absolutely
why do you share
conscious.
it? How do
It
you
was a
start every
decision.
meeting?
It was a decision that was made that we would start every meeting with the idea that we are here to try to pass a green amendment here in Washington State. And yeah, that's how we start every meeting.
Yeah,
And it's
it's
a
really
conscious
great.
decision.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it makes clear. I think one of the things that I really love about it is it really, it sets the tone for every meeting, and it makes clear to people, this is why we're here. There are many, many, many things that are happening in the world, and there are many things that we all have to do in our personal lives, and also in our environmental lives, to the extent we do, in environmental activism in other places and spaces. But when you start the meetings that way, it's such a beautiful way of saying, okay, for this next hour and a half, this is how we're all going to journey together and dedicate our time and our energy, our emotion, our creativity. It's towards this one common goal. And I think it's very effective. Certainly it always strikes me, and I really appreciate it when you start the meetings that way.
Well, that's great. It was something that Monica actually had suggested. And Monica, for all of you who don't know, is a person who's been part of the team since the beginning, who's currently on sabbatical. But in our strategic conversations, it was her suggestion that we do that. And I think it really does sort of clear the air and clears everyone's plate. This is what we're doing now. And we're going to focus on this for an hour, and then you can go on. But let's really get the attention to this issue right now.
I think that's great. I think you have to do that too in these scenarios, because I think when people think about all these other fundamental rights that we have, like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, property rights, it's so easy to now be like, oh, well, of course that passed, of course that happened, and nobody. There are still obviously things that are enshrined in our legal system that we do still have people around who fought for it, but a lot of people weren't part of those fights or around for those fights, and it is just kind of that knee-jerk well, duh, we would have that. But I think it is interesting that this is such an uphill fight, but I think but to me it being an uphill fight means that it's a good thing, because most good things are hard to get to start off. So I think maintaining that positivity, and I don't think folks always realize how crucial that is to keeping you going, because it's so easy to just get bogged down.
Yeah, and it would be so easy to just drop off, wouldn't it? Yeah, and for me, I do a lot of thinking, and I think our whole group does, about how to impress youth with the idea that you do have a right to clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment, and you have a voice about that, and it's worth fighting for, because you don't have a voice. but you should have a voice, I guess, is a better way to put it, right? It should be a basic and inalienable right.
Are you finding, David, well, why don't you talk a little bit about the Washington tour that's coming up, what it is, why you think it's so valuable, and then maybe speak to this point that you're talking about, engaging a wide variety of communities, but also hoping to bring in more young people who may be thinking about their environment, thinking about environmental activism in wonderful ways, but not thinking about this concept of the Constitution and the environment.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's tough because I think that, well, one of the pathways that we're now exploring is through high school groups that have either environmental or social justice action groups, because they do teach, civics in high school. And how do we tap into that as a way to reach youth, to remind them of the power of the Constitution, and also for those communities that know that, that are not really clear that the Constitution pertains to them, I think is one of the barriers in a Green Amendment. There are communities that don't think that the Constitution speaks to them, and so helping them realize that it does, and that it could, and that it should. And so, does that answer the question?
Well, can you speak a little bit about how you're bringing, maybe talking with the youth groups that you're reaching out to, the schools that you're reaching out to, about this wonderful opportunity coming up to come together with the Washington Green Amendment Coalition and Green Amendments for the Generations, because I'm looking forward to being there. Telling people a little bit about the tour that's coming up and how it came about and what it involves and what you're hoping is going to happen as a result.
Yeah, I think one of the things is, making sure that you make it clear that you can tie into what their objectives are. The advisors of the earth groups or the social justice groups, that you can be complementary to what they're already trying to do. In fact, most of them are looking for ways to engage youth. And so this is an opportunity. And so I find that I'm presenting an opportunity to them to latch onto. And then, of course, you coming to Washington State is an opportunity to go, hey, and you can meet Maya. We can have a direct conversation with you in person. Show up to the event. And talk with us. Say hello to me. I'm going to be there. Maya will be there. We're not creating a barrier at these. These are town hall type events that we want to be conversational and personal. And bring your students and bring yourself and a friend, and let's talk about the power of a constitutional amendment that guarantees our right to clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment for now and for future generations.
And do you have any, so I'm going to quick for folks to run through so starting September 14th, you can go to Seattle, the September 15th, I forgot why I can't say the day. September 15th, Olympia. September 16th, Vancouver. The 17th is Yakima. The 18th is Richland. The 19th is Spokane.
That's it.
How did you, coming up with these days, did you have, thoughts for where it was going to be and, the process of that?
Absolutely. The Green Amendment is something that everyone can get behind, particularly here in Washington State. We need to convince people of that. It takes 2/3 majority vote in both the Senate and the House in order to bring it to ballot. So we made sure that we were not just talking to, Washington State is kind of divided by the mountains. You head up to the mountains and you head down the east side. And as you head down the east side of the mountains, you get a more conservative perspective. And so we made sure that we were not just talking to our people, that we were talking to people from a wide variety of perspectives. And so the tour was designed to hit cities that would do that.
Do you think, David, and I'm going to be interested, Annika, in maybe what your thoughts are a little bit more broadly, but we are in a moment in time where there's a lot of divisiveness politically, and we are in a moment in time, whatever people's politics are, where environmental protections at the federal level are being rolled back. And so protections that people have counted on for years and years, not even realizing it, right? That basic protections for water and for air and the wonderful environments that enrich all of our lives, right? These things are now being rolled back, redefined, undermined. I guess different people have different perspectives on that. And, just thinking about the Green Amendment effort in Washington State, because you're talking about these differing politics. Have you experienced, or are you thinking about how that national reality and what's happening at the national level is or could influence or impact the conversations that you're trying to have in a really positive way in Washington State?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, the first thing I guess I think about is that, the distraction tactic that our government wants to use definitely, I think, is hitting the environmental world. I mean, they want us to forget about, environmental rights because, they want to exploit. But you have to be careful about how you word this. You can't go in and say that in some parts of the region, and you shouldn't. Because there are other perspectives and you need to be able to hear other perspectives. So that was my perspective. But we have to think a lot about what's going on in each particular area. And really, we talked about this earlier, Maya, is what problem are we trying to solve? And we need to hear from communities about what are they afraid of in the future when it comes to climate and environment. What are their concerns? And so I think this tour is an informative one, but it's also a listening one.
Yeah, I mean, I think my problem, and I'm not always saying this in there's some nefarious thing going on. I just find when I talk to people who will say have different perspectives than I do on the environment and things, and I'm always surprised, and I always find that when it always comes down to that sort of well, you want to take my job, or you want to make it so that we won't get as much tax revenue because you won't let that project come in or anything like that. And I always feel like I can trace it back to somebody fed you that information or fed you that falsehood, rather than people kind of having that earnest conversation with themselves. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, of there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of people who really every day is just about how am I gonna pay my mortgage and put food on the table. And I understand we have to give so much space for those people, but just that idea of when you break it base level of your kid or your mother or yourself, or whatever important people in your life currently right now are being forced to breathe in little tiny particles that are going to give them asthma or COPD or cancer or Alzheimer's or whatever myriad of things that we have scientifically, non-disputably, debatably linked to these industries, and it's not a necessary thing. And actually the reason that those are happening is so that somebody else in their tower on high can make a quick buck off of you.
Yeah.
And so trying to always, I feel trying to always find those connectors of trying to get everybody to understand we're all so much, when it comes to the environment, the air, we're all so much more similar than what we realize. And it's just unfortunate we've created this system where certain groups of people, types of people, are having the worst of the worst put on them.
Yeah, no doubt about it. The sacrifice zones, which is still occurring, right, with the whole AI energy push, and communities are fighting back on that too. They don't want those power plants in their neighborhoods, and so communities are fighting back. And economics is a critical issue. and people are afraid of economic loss in their communities, and that has to be heard. I think, yeah.
So I had a really interesting and I think fun experience just this past week. I was going to New Mexico to talk about the New Mexico Green Amendment and actually the climate and clean energy values of the amendment. And when I was on the flight out, there was a gentleman who was opposite row, one ahead of me. So I could see what he was watching on his little video screen, and he was watching Fox News. And I actually didn't presume that he was conservative, because I know sometimes people like to get a variety of news. It's like I know my husband David, he often listens to a wide variety of news outlets, because he wants to hear what everybody's saying, and he wants to hear what to him is the other side, what the other side is saying. Anyway, but when we were waiting to deplane, he asked me, why I was in New Mexico, and I actually told him that I was there in New Mexico to talk about the Green Amendment, and I led off with clean water, clean air, and then healthy climate and healthy environments. And he very quickly responded, yes, we should all have that. We should all have clean water and clean air. And then the conversation did evolve. It continued. We were waiting to deplane for a long time. We were back in the back of the plane. And, he started talking about how he didn't believe in climate. He started talking about how it was just impossible to get off of fossil fuels by tomorrow. And I said, well, who's telling you by tomorrow? Well, that's what they're telling us. It has to be like right back. And I explained to him, I said, well, no, actually, nobody's saying to shut off all the fossil fuels right now tomorrow. What we're saying is don't drill any more wells. Don't invest more in fossil fuels. Invest in clean energy, so that we, as those fossil fuel operations, use up, dry up, they go away and clean energy kicks in. And there's going to be some more shutdowns, but for the most part, that's really what we're talking about. And then he started saying, well, clean energy, that's not a thing. Everything under a solar panel dies. I said, everything under a solar panel dies? Like, what are you talking about? Yes, everything under a solar panel dies. I said, well, that's not true. I said, I have solar panels on my house right now, and nothing underneath is dying. And I said, we could put solar panels on roofs, and that would be a really great thing. And then he transitioned to, well, they keep telling us everybody has to drive an electric car by the end of the year. I said, by the end of the year? I said, who's telling you that? Oh, they're forcing us to do that. Who is this? Well, they're doing it in California. I said, well, that's not true. It's not, but so he clearly had his information, like Annika said, he had his information, and he would put it out. But it really was not accurate information. And what I really tried to do was with a smile on my face and a pleasant tone, well, that's not true. And I did say to him, I said, listen, I didn't actually get his name. I said, I work with the communities that are being burdened by fossil fuels. And, and I see how their kids are getting cancer, and I see how they're losing the quality of their lives, and I see how they can't sell their homes anymore because their homes no longer have any value because they're right next to a fossil fuel site, and so the family is forced to stay there, to live there. They can't move, they can't get away, and and it's really destroying their lives. And then he said, well, everything has a downside. And it was all, but the truth is, like, I kept, again, trying to positively question, but I always brought it back to, I said, but even if we can't agree on the issue of climate, we can agree that everybody deserves clean water and clean air, right? Oh, yes, we can agree on that. And by the time we got off the plane, he came over and he gave me a side hug, not a photo,
nice.
Side hug. And he said, that was a really great conversation, and I think he was surprised. He wasn't being lambasted for a different opinion. I was just trying to, just have a conversation with him. And in fact, he then rushed off to go get his luggage. And then when I went to go to the baggage claim, suddenly this person comes running up to me, which I didn't recognize because it was the same gentleman, but he had taken his coat off. So it was and he was rushing up to me, proudly showing me his watch. And he's like, look at that. And it was a big red watch. And I said, wow, that's cool. And he said, do you see it? And I said, I'm sorry, I don't have my reading glasses on. I don't see it. He says, it says Trump. He said, I got it for myself for my birthday. Best birthday present I ever got myself.
Yeah.
I did. I will have to say, I did say, well, and how much did you pay for that watch? And he said, $500. And I said, oh, really? I said, well, I run a nonprofit, Green Amendments for the Generations. We could sure use a $500 donation. And he said, oh, I have no more money anymore. And with a smile, he rushed out. But all of it is to say is, you know,
Yeah.
that this is a conversation with somebody who clearly had different politics, could have gone south very quickly, or I could have just avoided the conversation. But,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, instead engaged in a positive way. And I actually had fun with it. He was a lovely person.
Yeah.
And
And you got
maybe,
a hug out of it.
and I got a hug. And you know, and maybe I didn't change his mind.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But maybe I also, maybe he understands that just because somebody has a different perspective on the environment, while in this political climate we're in all the time, you know, people are being told if you're on the more liberal side of the environment, you know, you hate on everybody who's more conservative. Maybe he
sure.
will realize that's just not true.
Yeah.
You know.
Well,
So
Maya, what do you say to people who we've talked about this some, but I'd love to hear where you are now. We haven't talked about it in a couple months. To people who feel that the Green Amendment might be a threat to alternative energy solutions.
yeah. So, I mean, you know, really, I explained to them very clearly how this is a powerful positive force because in the Green Amendments, we clearly are recognizing, whether we say the word climate or just by recognizing the environmental rights of the people, we clearly are recognizing the right of the people to a safe climate. And Green Amendments also clearly recognize the duty on government officials to protect a state's natural resources for future generations. So they have to be thinking long term about their thinking. And the reality is, and because advancing clean energy is such a critical part of ensuring people have a right to a safe climate, ensuring that we don't have climate change that's devastating our water, our air, our ecosystems because of the wildfires and the heat and, you know, the floods or the drought, that the Green Amendment becomes this really important foundation, actually obligating government officials to advance clean energy, because if you don't advance clean energy, you're not going to be able to protect the right of the people to a safe climate. You're not going to ensure that you are protecting natural resources for future generations, right? Protecting their right to water and clean air. And there's some more facets to it. But the long and the short of it is, it really is a powerful foundation. And I have a lot of materials on the greenamendment.org website, on the Washington greenamendment.org website. We have materials, greenamendment.org, for those who are interested, that really lay it out for people, so that if they do get that false challenge that a green amendment is bad for securing clean energy, people can really understand that that's just not true. It's actually quite the opposite. It becomes a powerful positive tool that drives clean energy in order to protect people's environmental rights.
Yeah, and I think that's an important issue as we listen to people, because people do think that, and to hear their concerns. Yeah.
So, Annika, did you have any wrap-up question?
No, I think it's just interesting hearing you both talk, because I think when Maya and I have been in the room too with like people on like the other side of the issue, or talking to people that, you know, we've been kind of told like, well, this is your, you know, this is the proponent, so this is who you have to have a conversation with, whatever. Opponent, not proponent. Opponent.
Yeah.
And I just do always, I'm like I genuinely listen, and I feel like I'm really trying to hear what they're saying, because I really want to know what the concerns are, and I really want to be like, not do you have a point in the sense of like, oh, I'm going to walk away from the work here because it's vital no matter what, but like, you know, like, is there some, and I know Maya's done this too, like, is there some, I don't want to say middle ground, whatever, like, how can we have this conversation that's productive? And I don't always feel that is done the same way on their side, and, you know, that comes for a myriad of reasons based on who the person is or what their job is or whatever, like what they're there to do. And so it's just interesting because I hear both of you like talking about like genuinely wanting to make those connections and those pathways and find those solutions. And I wish that I don't, and again, I'm not saying everybody, but I do think that there are those who come to it and they don't want to do that, and that always is like the frustrating part where I'm like, if you could just like listen for 5 seconds,
Yeah.
I think you would understand how like this is good for everybody, but because you've either got this other narrative that's like a falsehood, or you've got your, talking points, because some people do go in and they're told like, you may not acquiesce to anything on this, and so they're just gonna like walk that path, and that's what I always think is kind of disappointing, always.
Yeah. Do you think, like I think about, I think convincing people that the concept of a green amendment is good is not as hard as convincing them that it's necessary.
Yes, that's a good point, David,
Yeah.
and a very good observation. But it is necessary because our current laws are about perpetuating pollution, not refocusing, on protecting communities and protecting the environment, on prevention first. And so you're right, like under our current laws, we're going to continue to have problems unless we can have this kind of constitutional transformation. I think that that's I've never thought about it that way. Good to have versus necessary to have.
I think that's where the barrier is, convincing, people will say, well, there's other laws that protect us, but we know those can go away so easily. But for me, it's also, as much as the Constitution can, it reinforces for the young people that you have a right to this voice to protect your community.
So I really hope that if you're in Washington State, our Washington Green Amendment tour spans the state. Annika gave all the cities, and David and I are going to both be there at every one of these events. I'm looking forward to engaging with you, talking to you, sharing information with you. But I think, as David said, very, very importantly, listening to you. We want to hear your questions, but we also, frankly, want to hear your pontifications. We want you to stand up and say what you think about a green amendment. We're going to try to, get people's information or statements on video to the extent that they're willing. So that we can, just really capture them and bring them into the whole Green Amendment conversation. So for those who are in Washington State, wagreenamendment.org. You'll learn about the tour. You'll learn about the Washington Green Amendment proposal. You'll have pathways to engage. And when you come to the tour, again, you'll be able to meet and speak with David and learn how you could become part of his leadership team. Did you have any final thoughts of inspiration for all of us, David?
No, hope to see you all soon.
Everybody who's listening, look in the show notes, look at all this. I'll have the link for where you can register for the tour. It's bit.ly/GA tour WA, and they'll all be linked below.
What do you think, Annika? I think that David is just a really powerful, positive force, and he does it differently than I do in terms of environmental activism, but he's so compelling, in my opinion.
David's very calming, and I mean that in like a really good way, that I think like David just makes me like feel good about everything going on in Washington. I'm like, like it's like that like, it's just gonna be okay. Like when you have a really good conversation with your therapist and you're like, you're right, and you just feel good about it. That's how David makes me feel. I'm like, okay, good.
And I know he calls it his facilitation style, but I really do think it's a leadership style. He makes sure that there's, just like I always say, there's a place and space for everyone in the Green Amendment movement. David makes sure there's a place and space for everyone in the leadership team of the Washington Green Amendment. And he has created a dynamic where everybody is a co-equal leader. But of course, there always has to be somebody who opens and closes and facilitates and directs and keeps things going. And he does it in just such a beautiful way. So I'm really glad that we had the opportunity to talk to David. I really hope that people come to the Washington tour because it's going to be great fun.
Yeah, and so for anybody, again, all the tour information will be below. If you're not following the Green Amendment social medias, it's just at Green Amendment. There might be an S at the end. If I'm wrong, I'll have to look. So feel free to do all of that, and you can see all the postings. Registering for the tour is not required, but it is helpful for us to be able to get a nice little head count of who's going to be there. And really, whether this is for anybody, all groups, all people, all backgrounds. So whether you're super experienced in this arena or you're brand new, you are all more than welcome to come. Bring your friends, bring your family, bring your coworkers, guilt trip whoever you want to come to the tour. And we'd love to see you. Like we said, 6 cities, 6 days. So Maya's going to be on the move. It's a really great chance to get involved. And with that too, if you've enjoyed this show, there will be a link down at the bottom. Green Amendments for the Generations is a nonprofit, so please feel free to donate, become a member, sign a petition. All that will be down at the bottom for you to support the move.